Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're going to be going over something pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It's a list we found
Okay.
of the most hated men outside of politics.
Oh, wow. Okay, so not in
Yeah,
politics.
so not like a current president
Okay.
or senator or anything like that.
Gotcha.
And this is from a website called thetop10s.com.
Okay.
And it's really
Stuff's
interesting.
really fun.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is based completely on public perception.
Oh, interesting.
So,
So not like an objective.
yeah, it's not objective badness or anything like that.
Okay.
But it's fascinating to kind of see like what makes someone so widely disliked.
Right.
Is it their actions, their personality, or like something else
It's
entirely?
like a combination of things,
Yeah.
one or the other.
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna kind of try to figure out today.
Okay.
So starting off right at the top, we have some of the usual suspects.
Okay.
We've got Elijah Alex Jones, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those are some,
Yeah, pretty heavy hitters.
yeah, big names.
And each of these guys carries kind of like a heavy weight of accusations with them.
Oh, absolutely.
Ranging from like sexual assault and conspiracy theories
Mhm.
to, just general abuse of power convicted crimes.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that they're right there at the top.
Well, I think that speaks volumes to how quickly the court of public opinion move.
Right.
And how it often outpaces even the legal system.
Yeah.
Because, especially online, there's a constant influx of new information and new speculation.
And everyone has an opinion that they want to
Absolutely.
share, as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And then, speaking of notoriety and how it's achieved,
Okay.
we have a little bit further down the list, the inclusion of Charles Manson,
Oh, wow.
which is kind of jarring
It is.
to see,
Yeah.
convicted murderer, cult leader, all that stuff.
Mhm.
But he's not even in the top 10.
That's a really good point.
So, like, how does that happen?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Like, how does online infamy compare to real-world actions?
Right.
Maybe online infamy with its constant, virality and it's spreading so easily.
Yeah.
It kind of eclipses
Right.
what happens in the real world.
It's almost like in the digital age, those actions don't matter as much.
It's an interesting question to consider, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And then this leads us into a category that kind of dominates this list.
Okay.
And it's entertainment.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, why are we so quick to turn on those who entertain us?
I think this speaks to how we view celebrities in the digital age.
Okay.
Because, there's this sense of closeness.
Right.
That's almost like we're friends with them or...
Yeah, that they're our buddies.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're just seeing, like, their everyday lives.
Yeah, so when something happens, we take it a lot more personally.
Right.
Because we feel more invested.
Right.
And it makes us have much stronger reactions, both positive and negative.
Right. So it's like a double-edged sword, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because it goes beyond just their work.
Okay.
Like Justin Bieber, for example.
Oh, yeah.
He's on the list.
Okay.
And he's ranked higher than some dictators.
Wow.
Okay.
So clearly.
I mean, he had a very controversial early career, and a lot of people considered him to be arrogant.
Right.
And there was a very vocal online backlash against him.
Right. And it's almost like those youthful transgressions that
Right.
he made early on in his career. It just became like
Yeah, they became part of his story.
cemented in everyone's mind.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, regardless of how much he's grown since then or,
Yeah.
what he's done to try and become a better person, it's like, that still sticks with him.
Right. People are still holding on to that.
Yeah, it's difficult to shake off a narrative once it's been created,
Right.
especially online. Yeah. And then we also have Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit.
Oh, yeah.
He's on here, and it seems like he's on here for his involvement in Woodstock '99.
Yes.
I vaguely remember it being like a disaster.
It was a huge disaster.
But how did he like contribute to that chaos?
So it was supposed to be, this revival of peace and love.
Okay.
The whole idea of the original Woodstock.
Right.
But instead it just descended into this chaos. There were fires, riots, a lot of allegations of assault.
Wow.
And Durst with his, very aggressive onstage persona.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and he was kind of encouraging the crowd, egging them on. So he
Right.
became like a symbol for everything that went wrong with the festival.
Wow. So just like one event.
Yeah, one event can completely ruin your public image.
Just solidify that negative image.
Absolutely.
And then we have Mike Myers, who's a little bit different
Yeah.
because his infamy seems less about like public spectacle
Right.
and more about just like behind the scenes behavior.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so like there are these persistent anecdotes
Okay.
about like his alleged onset tyranny,
Like what kind of things?
like unreasonable demands, volatile
Oh,
outbursts.
wow.
Yeah, and it's hard to say like how much of this is completely accurate or if it's embellished at all.
Right?
But it definitely contributes to that perception
Yeah.
of him being difficult and demanding.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's almost like in the digital age, public perception is kind of this tapestry woven from
Right.
like those big public actions,
Yeah.
but also the
Yeah, the
smaller.
little whispered narratives.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how much of that, how much do those narratives actually contribute to
Right.
people's perceptions, and especially when they get amplified and maybe even distorted online?
Right, and then shared so many times.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it's like we hold them to a higher standard.
Yeah, it's like we expect them to be, not just entertaining, but also good people.
Right, and like morally upright.
Exactly. Yeah, like we expect them to be role models in a way.
And then when they don't live up to those expectations,
Yeah.
the backlash can be pretty rough.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because this list isn't just about the world of entertainment.
Oh, right.
There are also figures like, Andrew Wilson, the CEO of EA,
Okay.
and Mark Zuckerberg, who runs Meta.
Right.
And their inclusion kind of points to this growing frustration that people have
Right.
with corporate practices in the digital age.
Yeah, and Andrew Wilson, I think his presence on the list has a lot to do with the backlash against like microtransactions and loot boxes
Oh, yeah.
in gaming.
Absolutely.
And you explain those a little bit for people who maybe aren't familiar?
Yeah, so microtransactions are basically these little in-game purchases
Okay.
that allow players to unlock extra content or like speed up their progress.
Okay, so you're paying
Yeah, you're paying a little bit extra.
on top of the game that you already paid for.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then loot boxes are kind of similar,
Okay.
except they're randomized. Okay. So it's like you pay for a chance.
Oh, so you don't even know what you're going to get.
Yeah, you don't know what you're going to get, and it's often like a very small chance of getting what you actually want.
Oh, so that's where the hate comes from.
Yeah, because it feels predatory,
Mm.
like these companies are taking advantage of people who maybe have a gambling problem or just really want that one item.
And they're willing to spend tons of money.
Exactly, and it taps into that feeling of powerlessness that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
It's like these big corporations are exploiting our desires just to make a profit.
And you don't feel like you have any control over it.
Exactly, and you see that same sentiment with Mark Zuckerberg.
Right. It's all about the data privacy.
Yeah, exactly, and how much power these social media companies have.
It's like a scary amount of power.
It really is, and it's unsettling to think that, all this information about us.
Everything we do online.
Yeah, everything we do online, it's being collected and used in ways that we don't even understand.
Right. Like we have no idea what's happening behind the scenes.
And raises these big questions about, who actually owns our data.
Right. Who controls it?
Yeah, and what they're doing with it.
And what could potentially happen to us.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit scary.
Yeah.
And then there's another category on this list that's even more disturbing.
Oh, okay.
And it's the YouTubers and social media personalities.
Okay.
And we're talking about people like Daddy05 and Pelluchin Entertainment.
Yeah, I remember hearing about them.
Their alleged actions are really horrifying.
They were pretty awful.
Yeah, involving child abuse and animal cruelty.
Yeah. And it's just like, why?
Well, I think it highlights a dark side of these online platforms.
Okay.
It's a place where abuse and exploitation can happen.
Right. And it can be amplified so easily.
Exactly. And these algorithms that are designed to promote engagement,
Right.
they can end up prioritizing controversial or shocking content.
So it's like the algorithm is partly to blame.
Yeah, it's a really complex issue.
Yeah, because they don't want to be seen as like censoring.
Right.
But they also don't want
Yeah, they have to find that balance.
this awful content to spread.
Right. And it's a constant battle for these platforms.
Yeah, they're always trying to play catch up.
Yeah, because by the time they address an issue, it's already, become a big thing.
Right all over the internet.
Exactly.
So it's a really tough situation.
It is. And it reminds us that the internet, for all the good it can do,
Yeah.
it can also be a place where the worst parts of human nature
Yeah.
get amplified.
Yeah. It's crazy how one little thing can completely change the public's perception of someone.
Yeah, the internet could be a very unforgiving place.
For sure. So I'm curious, like, Does this list ever change?
Oh yeah, it's constantly changing.
Really?
Yeah, new people are added, others drop off, and the rankings are always shifting.
Oh, wow. So it's like a snapshot in time.
Exactly. It reflects the current moods of the internet.
So, like, someone who's the most hated today could be completely forgotten tomorrow.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a very fickle world.
That's kind of scary,
It is. It's a good reminder that fame and infamy are both very fleeting.
especially in the digital age.
Exactly. Everything moves so fast online.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
It really is. But, looking at this list, it makes you think about what it says about us.
Oh, yeah, like about humanity.
Yeah, like, are we too quick to judge?
Are we too easily swayed by what we see online?
Exactly. Do we let these narratives control our perceptions?
And do we ever stop to think about the real people behind these stories?
Right, because at the end of the day, these are all human beings.
With their own flaws and struggles.
Yeah, and we should remember that even when we disagree with them, or even dislike them,
Yeah, it's important to have some empathy.
absolutely, we should try to understand where they're coming from, even if we don't condone their action.
I think that's a really important message to leave our listeners with.
Yeah, agree.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the most hated men, what's the key takeaway?
I think the biggest thing is to be critical of what you see online.
Don't believe everything you read.
Exactly. Do your own research and try to get a balanced perspective.
And remember that there's always more to the story than what's being presented.
Yeah. And most importantly, treat everyone with respect, even if you don't like them.
Well said. Well, that brings us to the end of another deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It was great having you. And to all of our listeners out there, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember to be kind to one another. We'll see you next time.